Hey now, it's Brace for Impact, and I'm your host, Mike Gilbert, and I'm going solo on that ass, but it's still the same. We're talking TNA wrestling, and man, oh man, this is an emergency Brace for Impact podcast. I'm live right here on the YouTube. I'm using my cell phone. If you hear my AC in the background, that's because I'm sitting in my car out in the parking lot, and in Hawaii, it is still hot and humid. So guys, we got some breaking news that I am dumbfounded about that I never thought would happen. So let me hit the button.
Breaking news.
Tessa Blanchard, former TNA Knockouts champion, former TNA World Heavyweight champion. Tessa Blanchard, who was accused of racism and bullying other female wrestlers during different tours of Japan and throughout the States, who 24 hours before she won the TNA World or Impact Wrestling World title from Sami Callihan, a big story broke back in 2020, right before the pandemic happened, that she was a racist for using a racial slur towards another female wrestler during an argument and in a fight in Japan. She was also accused of bullying from several prominent wrestlers, notably Chelsea Green and Allison Kay or Sienna, whichever name she was going by at the time. I think more wrestlers other than that came out against her. And 24 hours later, it wasn't Hard to Kill back in 2020. It was, I cannot remember the name of the pay-per-view. Some of you guys can help me out with that. But she actually ended up defeating Sami Callihan for the Impact World Heavyweight Championship. And then right after that, the pandemic happens. And during the pandemic, she's in Mexico with her then husband, Daga. And she refused to come back to the States during the pandemic. At first, we thought because of COVID reasons, she was just fearing for her safety, which I think everybody respected at the time because we didn't know what the hell that disease was at the time. We didn't know how good or bad or indifferent that thing was going to be. So we were all being extra precautious. Nobody held that against her. But at a certain point, they wanted her to come back to work. And she was in Mexico. And she refused to come back unless she was given X amount of money. And she held the company up. She refused to send the belt back. Her contract was set to expire a couple of months after that period. So this was right in between Rebellion and Slammiversary of 2020. Her contract was set to expire. Scott D'Amore and Don Callis told her to eat shit. They stripped her of the title. I don't know. I think eventually she did end up sending the championship back, but she wanted money for it. And she's never really been seen on a prominent television show since then. That moment, coupled with the allegations of racism and bullying, essentially tanked her American television career. Now, she did go to WOW Superheroes. Jeannie Buses, who owns the Lakers, this is a tax write-off. She was the face of Women of Wrestling for a while and was their biggest star. And that too went sideways. She left that amid, I don't know if there was bullying allegations, but definitely like she didn't leave that company on good terms. I cannot remember the specific details around why she left. Oddly enough, WOW has a bigger television footprint than TNA, but nobody watched the show despite the fact that it technically gets more views. But a lot of that is because that show's coming on late at night and people forget to change the channel, or people just leave their TVs on and they just get credit for ratings. Much like the Ring of Honor years when they were on Sinclair Broadcasting, people were saying that they had way more viewers than Impact, but when in reality that just wasn't the case. They had no traction. But so she went to WOW Superheroes for a while. She leaves there amid turmoil. She ended up going to AAA for a cup of coffee, and then I would say the last year, maybe even longer, she has been in CMLL. And oddly enough, the people that are astounded by this, that are super upset, the people that don't watch TNA, now people that do watch TNA are really mad, and I respect them, and I think that their criticism of TNA in this moment is fair, and I'm going to get to that criticism because I have my own criticism. But I do take issue with a lot of the people, social media pro wrestling engagement Twitter accounts, attacking TNA, doing LOL TNA. We're very supportive of CMLL during the last year. And in fact, we're very supportive of the CMLL AEW relationship. They stayed quiet on CMLL using Tessa Blanchard and being a tag team champion in CMLL. They stayed quiet that entire time. Little to no criticism went CMLL's way, despite the fact that technically CMLL is a much more popular promotion in North America than TNA is. CMLL draws way more fans than TNA. They can get 8 to 10,000, sometimes less, sometimes more. They're in Mexico City on a pretty regular basis. They're way more popular in their country than TNA is in America, and that is an absolute 100% indisputable fact. So she was on a much bigger show than Impact for the last year, and was a title holder in that company, and they got very little criticism. But those people today, man, are coming out of the woodwork, pretending like they actually care about TNA and doing LOL TNA, talking about the demise of TNA. TNA is dying, yada yada yada. Okay, but there is a fair amount of criticism coming from the TNA faithful. And I completely understand it, and I think that it's warranted. I think the criticism is fair. Not only do you have the allegations, which again, that's a long time ago. Maybe she's changed. I don't know. I wasn't there. She has apologized to La Costa Negra, the person that she got into the argument with. I believe she's a Hispanic wrestler. She called a racial slur while on a tour in Japan when they were drunk and fighting and yada yada yada. She went out of her. I believe she made an amends to that person. They actually posed for a picture together. I believe that wrestler was in WOW with Tessa Blanchard, so I think they swooned everything over there. Okay. There's a lot more criticism coming from the other American wrestlers for her bullying behavior and toxic behavior towards them. And I don't know that she's made amends to any or all of them or any of them or one. I don't know the status of all that. I think from a TNA standpoint, the biggest criticism, and I think the scariest proposition, is that when she had leverage over the company, when the company needed her the most, she went out of her way to hold them up for money because she had leverage and power over them. And that's scary to bring that person back into your company. Because what if she gains popularity again and you need her? Would she do the same thing again? I think you would have to think yes. Now, this is a big opportunity for her, so everybody believes that she's going to be on her best behavior, and God, she should. I think that she absolutely should be on her best behavior because this is her getting back into the spotlight, into a major promotion in the U.S. and in Canada for the first time in 5 years. So, like, if she blows this, she legit will never get another opportunity. And you wonder why she's getting an opportunity right now. It's because, I'll be honest, she's one of the most talented American female wrestlers that I personally have ever seen. I don't know that there's that many that are better than her, at least when she was at her peak 5 years ago. Now, again, one thing we have to remember, we have to be honest about, that her peak was 5 years ago. Is she still the same wrestler that she was when she left? I think those questions are going to be answered coming up here shortly. Is she worth the hassle? Is she worth the trouble? We don't know the answer to that question. My prediction is that this whole thing, based on her history, based off of how things ended with her whenever she was in the Mae Young Classic, and she went there and she blew up there during an altercation with her then boyfriend Ricochet. That whole thing went south, and WWE didn't want to use her. She then comes into Impact, and then of course, once she gets a little bit of power, she has some leverage over the company. She went to her evil ways and tried to destroy the company. At the same time, when they were already under fire for having Dave Christ, Michael Elgin, and Joey Ryan on their roster during Speaking Out. And, there's a pandemic, right? And she's their biggest star, and by far the biggest star that they had in the company at the time. She was an actual, ratings needle mover. They had several episodes of Impact that averaged over 200,000 viewers, which the only time they were ever able to replicate that was whenever they brought in Kenny Omega. right? So she was an actual needle mover for the company in 2020 and in 2019. And will they be able to recapture any of that? I don't know. My guess is no. But when she had that power, she had that leverage, she went out of her way to try to screw them over. And that thing goes sideways. The WOW superheroes go sideways. So if we're just going based off of her history, based off of 3 different stops and 3 different promotions, I think the prediction, the smart money and the smart prediction would be she's going to blow this thing. Now, I got to go in a couple minutes because I'm only on this right now. And if you guys can hear, I'm driving. Don't worry, I'm a safe driver. And on base, the speed limit is like 15. So I think the smart money, the smart prediction is going to be on this whole thing, that her blowing it. And that's kind of where I'm at with it. This TNA, are they doing the right thing? I think time will tell. But Sean Ross Sapp has already got a report out saying that Jordynne Grace has pushed back on working with Tessa. PW Insider is confirmed that that Tessa has signed, and that the plan is for her to not only work with Tessa. I think Sean Ross Sapp said that the plan for Tessa is to work with Jordynne Grace. Sapp said that the plan is for her to beat Jordynne Grace because Jordynne Grace is on her way to WWE. Jordynne Grace has pushed back on all that. So I don't know how this whole thing's going to go. Now, I think the big question is, why are they bringing her back? And I think that's a very valid question. The why is because they're losing Jordynne Grace, and they didn't have the ability to build another star to take Jordynne's place. Masha Slamovich is a very good wrestler, but she just she's not there yet as far as being a big star like Jordynne Grace. She doesn't have Jordynne Grace's charisma just yet. I think that she can develop into that, but she's just not there yet. They weren't able to sign anybody else that was a big star. There's no free agents available that's a big star. And they they don't have the skill set to be able to develop another star to become the next Jordynne Grace at this point in time. The creative just isn't good enough. It just isn't. They don't have what it takes. So this is a complete panic move because they're losing their biggest female attraction in Jordynne Grace, and they don't know what else to do. And Gail Kim and Tommy Dreamer have always been big fans of Tessa's. I think a year ago, Tommy Dreamer, there was a rumor out there that Tommy Dreamer was trying to bring her back a year ago, and it ended up not going down. And so they felt with Jordynne leaving, now is the time to pull the trigger. There was a question, is Tessa going to show up tonight? PW Insider is reporting that she's going to be on Final Resolution tonight, and that she's going to be at the tapings tomorrow, and then she's going to be a feature talent going forward. All that is happening. She is in the company. They will be planning to use her. I would assume that with her beating Jordynne Grace, that's the plan. I think that if Jordynne Grace does some pushback there, I don't think that will happen. In fact, Jordynne Grace is a much bigger star than Tessa right now. Jordynne Grace is on her way out to WWE. She has all the leverage in this situation. If she does not want to work with Tessa Blanchard, no one would blame her. She would not lose her WWE deal. She would ride off into the sunset and go get that WWE paycheck and think nothing of it. She does not have to do this if she does not want to. So at this point, Tessa, Tommy, and Gail need to get groveling on their hands and knees to Jordynne Grace to beg them to do this for them. And she does not have to. There would be zero repercussions if she said, fuck you, I ain't doing it. Because she has all the leverage in the situation. And that's the situation that TNA put themselves in. They got their biggest star leaving, and they're trying to put a problematic former star over her that maybe when they work together, because they did work together in Impact before, maybe Tessa wasn't so nice to Jordynne. I don't know. I've never heard one way or the other, but it screams to me like Jordynne's in this position now. She's like, well, fuck her. She probably wasn't treating her very nice because that was her reputation at the time. I think that's a reasonable thing to think. I think that's a very reasonable thing to think. So you're not going to hear me defend TNA on this. You're not going to hear me defend anybody in that company for bringing Tessa. You're not going to hear me make apologies. You're not going to hear me make excuses for them when this whole thing, if it does blow up in their face, and I think that the likelihood is there that this whole thing could blow up, and they will have it coming. But what you will hear me do is I am completely wrong about this and that she has changed her ways. And then this next opportunity is a positive experience for her, for the company, for everybody else. You will hear me admit that I was wrong. Okay? You will hear that. You won't hear other people do that. You'll hear that from me. If I'm wrong about this, I'll come back on this podcast and I will admit as much. But my prediction remains the same, that this whole thing is going to blow up in their face, because I have history on my side. I hope for her sake, I hope she is a changed person. I hope she does go and make amends to everybody that she's wrong, because that's something that I've had to do in my life, and I think a lot of growth can come from that. I think being mean and rude and being a bully when you're in your teens and your 20s can, through harmful consequences and lived experience, I think once you get into your 30s and 40s, I think that people can actually change. I have to believe that people can change. I have to. But I'm going to predict that they won't change until they do, until I've seen some evidence that they have changed. And I just haven't seen the evidence with Tessa. Tessa went to CMLL. She didn't have any power or leverage over that company. She was bottom of the totem pole there. She was not an important figure in that company. Even though she was holding a tag team title, they don't really care about them belts. Like the belts, those belts in CMLL, they don't really care about. They'll put them on, take them off, doesn't matter. So she had no power over them, so she didn't get a chance to screw them over. So we'll see what happens with TNA. I'm interested to hear what everybody has to say on this. I do have to get to a meeting. I'm sitting outside in the parking lot, so I thought I'd just go live on my cell phone. I appreciate everybody for being here. I appreciate the chat. I'm sorry I didn't get to the chat. Terrence, I see you. Anthony, I see you. I see everybody in the chat. Thank you so much for being here. If you guys would, drop a like, drop a comment, and make sure you're a subscriber to the channel. And stay tuned tomorrow for Brace for Impact. We got a double episode. I was able to watch last night's episode. TNA didn't update it on their app for the West Coast feed. It was locked, so I watched it illegally. I downloaded it on Extreme Wrestling Torrents and put it on my Plex server. So that's how I was able to watch it this morning. And I'm going to watch Final Resolution tonight. And then, so tomorrow morning, a double episode live on Patreon, patreon.com/The Mike and JD Show. I'm going to be reviewing the episode last night, reviewing Final Resolution. And I'm going to be bringing on Lucha Doncic, who is going to do a fucking victory lap and might make me quit my podcast. He's going to do a victory lap. He's the biggest Tessa Blanchard fan in the world. He's been holding out hope for 5 years that this woman would come back, and he finally got his wish. He is going to be on the show tomorrow, and I think I might even have Gerard Ryan on the show tomorrow, who is a reporter for Body Slam, talking all things Tessa, all things TNA, Final Resolution, and Impact. So that's going to do it for me this week. And until next time, mahalo.